Hi everyone, my name is Mathis Rowland and welcome to my topic leader presentation. And so my presentation is titled Hawkin's Dynamic Force Plates Validated and Reliable Metrics for Monitoring Neuromuscular Fatigue and Performance Using the Counter Movement Jump. So a little bit about myself. I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science, in a strength and conditioning concentration, and I am a current student in the exercise physiology master's program. So let's begin with a little introduction. So Hawkin's dynamic force plates, what are they? And so Hawkin's dynamic force plates are portable dual platform force measurement. They are currently the gold standard specifically for jump performance. They have a sampling rate at 1,000 plus hertz, meaning every second they take 1,000 pictures plus. They're most commonly used for jump testing, landing, mobility, range of motion, some I, Ys, and Ts as we've done in the human performance lab with softball players in isometric tests such as an isometric nip-type pull. They provide a wide array of force time curve metric with 40 plus metric for the counter movement jump. And so they give sport practitioners a true understanding of an athlete's readiness and daily training readiness, or athlete readiness and daily training readiness, allowing for smarter program design to ensure non-functional overreaching, overtraining, very forgotten undertraining, and lowers risk of injuries. And so here, bottom left, okay, we have kind of a force time curve of what a typical force time curve looks like for a counter movement jump. All right, we'll kind of touch base on that a little bit more in this presentation. And then on the right are the force plates we have in our human performance lab at UMHB. And so two quick videos, all right? The first one's going to be a counter movement jump that I've assessed for one of my ultrasound jump performance studies. The athlete jumps, sticks the landing, and then the second, all right, is an EMG study. EMG sensors on the muscle, and you go max out on the back squat. Really cool. I just wanted to give you guys some real life example of how we can use the force plates. And then before we continue, all right, here's a PDF report of one counter movement jump. This was performed by me. It's 6.5 pages. And so as you can see, the real-time force time curve metric, all right, but again, 40 plus metric. So it's 6.5 pages. Really quickly, force plates get very complicated. They are very overwhelming, and there are lots of metric. And so breaking it down, all right, and making it as user-friendly as possible is imperative. And so now, why the counter movement jump? Well, the counter movement jump is the gold standard for neuromuscular fatigue assessment. All right, this was reported by Claudino et al. In 2017. All right, and neuromuscular fatigue is seen through lasting impairment of the stretch shortening cycle. All right, that can last up to 48 hours. All right, so stretch shortening cycle, all right, much slower, therefore showing greater levels of fatigue. It is well accepted as a great assessment of lower body power output. Liberman reported back in 2003. And then the counter movement jump is really easy, convenient, simple, and low skill jump variation that almost any athlete can do with or without the force plates. And again, they are much cheaper, user-friendly, alternative field-based methods to monitor counter movement jumps. All right. Really quickly, again, we'll touch back on this last point in a further slide, but Hawkin's dynamic force plate use center of mass and takeoff velocity in their jump height calculation. Why is that important? Because most field-based devices use a flight time method. Therefore, imagine I had an inertial measurement unit over my midfoot. So kind of a device over your midfoot that can calculate jump height. It's going to use flight time, all right, in their jump height equation. Therefore, if you have a little bit of a knee tuck, that increases flight time. Therefore, that increases jump height. All right, very quickly, very important. While those force plates, those Hawkin's dynamic force plates use center of mass, so it kind of takes that bias, if you will, or that biomechanical issue, if you will, out of the picture. So in the middle here for B, right, probably three of our most common jump variation, our squat jumps, our counter movement jump, which is the one we're focusing today, and then our drop jump, my second favorite jump variation. Importance of athlete monitoring and performance assessment. Well, athletes monitoring and performance assessment are important for multiple reasons. It's important for peaking at the right time, games and competition. It prevents, again, non-functional overreaching, overtraining, undertraining, and lowers risk of injuries. It ensures that program design is progressing and not regressing athletes. Very important, especially during season. Really important throughout all the sports seasons, if you will. And then they can provide baseline, which can be used for percentages in your strength and conditioning program. Really quickly, let's look at the super compensation graph. I've made this one for one of my papers. It's your basic, pardon me, it's your basic super compensation graph. All right, but I kind of added a little kick to it. So daily readiness, so how ready an athlete is to perform at their maximal level, reflected by neuromuscular fatigue, monitored with field-based methods, or in this case, the Hawkins dynamic force plates, which are more of a laboratory equipment, very expensive, but even better than those field-based methods. So really, really cool. All right, after an exercise, you'll deplete, you'll rest, you'll reach your baseline level, and then you work out again. Slowly, you go up. That's how you make adaptations. All right. Over time, with good nutrition, good recovery, everything should go up. And so now that we've kind of concluded our brief introduction, so what's the purpose and specific aim of this research question? So the purpose of this project aimed to investigate the most valid and reliable Hawkin dynamic metrics to monitor neuromuscular fatigue and performance using the counter movement jump. As you guys saw by that PDF example of one counter movement jump, there are over 40 metrics for the CMJ variation alone. All right, therefore, the goal of this project will be to report the 5 best metric to monitor neuromuscular fatigue and performance. And so article number 1 here, validity and reliability of the Hawkins dynamic force plates. So really, really quickly here, I just wanted to bring kind of a validity study of the device itself. All right, so this article by Badby et al. Back in 2023, all right, did a validity and reliability project, and they reported that this dual portable Hawkins dynamic force plates are valid and reliable in comparison to a non-portable in-ground and even more expensive force plate. And so this is just to further my point. Hawkins dynamic force plates are the gold standard in the game for force plates in general right now. And so this article kind of briefly mentions it. Still very expensive, still a laboratory equipment, but a little cheaper than those in-ground non-movable force plate system, if you will. And so I really love this article by Anisik et al. Back in, again, 2023. And so we know that Hawkins reports 40 plus metric for the counter movement jump. This article kind of categorized the different types of metric into 3 categories. So we have our performance, our kinetic, and our kinematic. And so I'll briefly touch on the performance. I'll touch on all of them, but performance include jump height, leg stiffness, RSI, which means or stands for reactive strength index, and MRSI, which stands for modified reactive strength index. I'll let you guys read the kinetic and kinematic list. There are plenty. I only wrote about 10, I believe. But kinetic, think of more of force and torque, while kinematic is a little bit more of the motion itself, the mechanics, the biomechanics of the movement. So I really like these 3 categories, and then I also labeled these categories for my top 5. And so really, really cool here. Article number 2, titled Post-Practice Neuromuscular Performance Changes in 3-on-3 Professional Female Basketball Players. And so I love this article by Dr. Kabarkapa. Dr. Kabarkapa is great. He's out at Kansas University, did his PhD with Dr. Para, and he's helping me on a couple projects. He's amazing. And so this article doesn't validate certain metrics, but there's a kick to why I've kind of chose this article. And so really, really cool to give you a quick 15-second research design of this article. He did 3 counter movement jump pre and post practice, and then the following morning and afternoon of the following day. And so the following day was to see if jump performance returned to baseline, essentially to look at neuromuscular fatigue to have better program design. And so he reported notable changes that were observed. And this article used Hawkin's dynamic force plates, which I really like. They use jump height or reported notable changes in jump height, average and peak propulsive power, propulsive net impulse, and modified reactive strength index. They reported that MRSI was the most sensitive pre and post practice. A little get ahead of ourselves. This is definitely one of the metrics I chose. And so, why did I choose this article? I love force plates. I do a lot of force plate testing. And so I currently have a muscle quality, muscle size ultrasound and jump performance study. And so I emailed Dr. Kabarkapa to ask for his recommendations since he knows much more about metrics and Hawkin's force plates and jump testing in general. And he recommended me those metrics. And so, yes, I did use a lot of those metrics in my final top 5. Really, really cool. Wanted to mention this article very quickly. And so a deeper look into MRSI now. And so its equation is represented by jump height divided by takeoff velocity. And so why is MRSI better than RSI for the counter movement jump? Because if we take a look at the RSI equation, it considers contact time instead of takeoff velocity. In a counter movement jump, there really isn't a contact time. For a drop jump, for instance, starting on the box, jumping on the force plates, and exploding as quick as possible, RSI would be much better. But in this case, considering there's no contact time, MRSI is gold. So it's a great metric because it combines how fast and how high an athlete can jump, therefore making it a great reflection of the stretch shortening cycle, therefore very sensitive to neuromuscular fatigue, making it a great metric to monitor daily training readiness. Therefore, it is my metric number 1, and it is considered a performance metric. I love this graph. Moving on now to a deeper look into peak and average propulsive power. And so peak power produced during the propulsive phase, as we can see with this beautiful picture represented in green. And so propulsive phase is in that concentric portion when you're kind of reaching that triple extension. All right, full extension of knees, ankle, knees, and hips. And so peak power it's the peak power produced during the propulsive phase for peak propulsive power, and then the average, all right, during the propulsive phase for the average propulsive power. So it represents how much power and how quickly it is produced during the concentric phase. It's a great metric to monitor lower body power output, can be very beneficial for explosive athletes. Therefore, metric number 2, it's a kinetic metric. Specifically, I am choosing that peak propulsive power. Now, a deeper look into propulsive net impulse. So what is impulse? Impulse is a change in momentum of an object. Its equation is represented by force time, and it's the amount of force measured throughout the entire concentric component, and so the entire concentric portion, which is why I chose peak propulsive power over average, because this propulsive net impulse considers the concentric as a whole. All right, so it's how much total force, power over time. Therefore, metric number 3, it's also a kinetic metric. I love it. It's great. And so article 3 now, trends assessing neuromuscular fatigue in team sports, a narrative review. This is a great article. I really, really love because it provides field-based and laboratory methods to monitor neuromuscular fatigue at the current moment. It's a pretty recent article. I want to say back in 23, again 24 maybe. And so within that, Taylor et al. Reported, all right, that jump height is the most reported metric to monitor neuromuscular performance. Heishman et al. 2020 reported that flight time to contact time ratio can also be a great metric. And so now a deeper look into jump height. I've already touched base on the equation, but we'll touch on its equation a little deeper on this slide. And so Hawkin uses a velocity base or an impulse momentum equation. Those names are interchangeable. And its equation is represented by takeoff velocity squared divided by 2 times 9.81, which is gravity. All right. And so why is it better than a flight time method? I'm repeating myself here. But because knee tuck, or when using a flight time method, knee tuck can increase flight time, therefore it increases jump height. And so a velocity-based or impulse momentum equation kind of takes the bias out of it, which is why it's a much better calculation. It's a much better metric, but not every field-based device provides that takeoff velocity. This is why, hence, they use a flight time method. Therefore, metric number 4, it's another performance metric. So we're at 2 performance, 2 kinetic metric at this point. And so braking phase duration now, sneak peek, metric number 5, duration to complete the braking phase. All right, so essentially it's the time that it takes you between the eccentric and concentric portion of the counter movement jump. Could be a good measure to monitor neuromuscular fatigue, because more fatigue, greater braking phase duration. Therefore, the longer that duration is, it may tell us, or it might tell a sport practitioner that an athlete is less recovered and not as ready to go. Maybe dial back a little bit, smarter program design here. And so this is my metric number 5, and again, it is a kinetic metric, all right? And so we'll talk a little bit on this slide of, we'll give it firstly a recap and why I haven't chose any kinematic metric. Let me touch base on that. I haven't chosen any kinematic metric because from a performance or a neuromuscular standpoint, the motion itself may not be as important. However, I'm sure it can provide some very, very valuable information. But one key takeaway or one key factor here is that a lot of kinematic, if we go back to that slide with the other tables, a lot of kinematic metrics or variables are actually used in performance and kinetic equations. Therefore, it's not fully lost, if you will, and so they're still incorporated, but it's directly not a kinematic variable. And so moving on to our 5 metric recap. So MRSI, I won't repeat the equations, but great for neuromuscular fatigue, great reflection of the stretch shortening cycle. Peak propulsive power, great for performance, solid for powerful sports and athletes. Propulsive net impulse, great for performance, again, solid for powerful sports and athlete. Jump height, I love that Hawkins used a velocity-based or impulse momentum. Great to monitor performance, great to monitor neuromuscular fatigue. And then lastly, our braking phase duration, all right, great to monitor neuromuscular fatigue. Longer the duration, the more fatigue an athlete may be. And so to conclude, guys, and so force plates can be a very valuable device and provide great information about fatigue, which can translate to smarter and better program design. Force plates can be very overwhelming and difficult to understand. I hope that you guys have kind of understood this, and that with 40 plus metric, it's definitely very overwhelming, and this is really why I decided to use or to choose this as my topic, because I do a lot of force plate testing and there's so much I don't know about them. And so, and even sometimes I use a metric and I really don't even know what it means to its full extent. So this was very helpful. And then choosing the right metric for a certain objective, performance or neuromuscular fatigue in this case is imperative, is key. So my final stand, guys, MRSI, peak propulsive power, propulsive net impulse, jump height, and braking phase duration are the best metrics to monitor neuromuscular fatigue and performance. And so if I was a sport practitioner, if I was a strength and conditioning coach, a sports scientist, I would use these 5 metrics, all right, for performance and NMF. And so a couple questions. I know this is somewhat of a tricky topic, but I wanted to offer some questions to attack the discussion from a different perspective. You guys can argue the metrics. I would love that. I want to learn more about it, but a couple questions. Are force plate testing too much? Meaning, are they over the top? Should sport practitioners use more field-based devices such as IMUs, inertial measurement units, some jump mats, which are very common, some optical illusion systems, or even the good old Vertec? Nothing wrong with the Vertec. Or should athletes or sport practitioners, use nothing at all? Do you see the benefit of jump testing personally? Do you think using jump or force plates to monitor specifically neuromuscular fatigue, do you think that is almost too much? As kind of Sawyer mentioned in his presentation, should it be more of a natural coach and instinct? Question number 3, how else would you use the force plates? I provided a couple examples, but can you think of any other ideas where if you had access to force plates with a particular sport team, how else would you use those force plates? And then last question, I think is really cool, very important. What population type would you use the force plate with? So would you use them with youth, high school athletes, college athletes, and professional? Would you start at college athletes only? Would you start at the professional only? Or again, going back to question 1, would you not use them at all? And so, thank you very much, guys. I appreciate. Hopefully, this was informative. Here are my references. Thank you very much. I hope you guys are enjoying the class. Thank you.